Hello and what's up? Standard deck techs are still here, despite the Preksha All-in-One is now legal to play in the format. So this deck feature for today is from a previous post which I did on my blog. As you can see here, this is the standard deck tech one standard. I mean blue-white poison control. So I made a blog post that was done last Monday, and I've decided that we can go further into the discussion by making this video about this deck. So I got some reference list prior to building this one, and most of the card choices were also based on the popularity of these card components in a blue-white shell for standard. So let's go ahead and check this out. We have 2 artifacts, 6 enchantments, 7 creatures with 12 instants, 24 lands, 3 planeswalker with the Wandering Emperor in the nice shiny foil version, and 6 sorceries to make up this build. So why we still have creatures despite the deck being going with the control strategy is that we're going to go with the mid game up to the late game and adding some utility cards to make sure that our land drops will not really miss. So starting out with this creature, Ambitious Farmhand or Season Qatar setup, in which you can basically fetch out a basic plains card from the deck and put it in your hand. And for the bonus instance that you can be able to transform this one in the common ability to have this one becomes a Season Qatar with a 3/3 lifelinker. It's very relevant in terms of life gain, since very important in the late game against most aggro opponents. So that is for the farmhand, and then the other creature choices that was added here are mostly for the utility kind. We have one copy of Lorem the Third Path, in which you can basically destroy or artifact or enchantment from your opponent, and have a card draw if needed, but you would also have your opponent draw a card. Our lone copy of Overcharged Amalgam. This is just very basic flashy counter spell creature. At the same time, could be a good flyer threat, because when it exploits a creature, counter target spell, activated ability, or triggered ability. Since we don't have access to Zuri, we'll go with this creature, and since we have some creature sources to exploit, example is wedding announcements, copies of farmhands, and if all else fails, then we can also use the tokens created by White Sun's Twilight. So that's a good thing that we have a solid flyer / counter spell creature in our build. And last but not least, for the creatures build is Sanctuary Warden, since we're going to go with the late game. And Warden will basically produce this card draw in creatures, blockers that is in creatures, and at the same time became a 5/5 solid flyer that can also take out huge chunks of damage against most opponents. Now to support this one, since we have mentioned that the deck is going with poison control, we have some new cards from New Phyrexia that has been added here, and in particular are the 4 copies of that's basically 3 copies only, since this is the source of our poison. So Prologue to Paralysis, this common card instant. You pay 2, each opponent gets a poison counter and draws a card. And with that, once you get your opponents going with the counters, you can have Reject Imperfection to use this one to proliferate that deck. I mean that poison, to have them taken as a poison. And the bonus only here is that if you be able to counter a spell that has mana value 3 or less. So 2 copies of that. And also make sure that we have some creatures that can deal with as kind of a poison source in this build. So we have White Sun's Twilight to provide with that one. We're going to discuss this one in a bit along with the other sorcery cards. So to continue with this, the choices for our instance are the following, as well as several 1-offs in the deck. So for our 1-drop, I mean the 1-offs kind of spot removal here, Inform, Destroy Evil. We also have several counter spells here with Negate. Another spot removal is Soul Partition, very solid this, especially of having the spells to cast 2 more, very good for us to in the late game. And 3 copies of Makes Disappear, which is very classic of this, and which you can also use your tokens to use as payment for casualty to be able to counter spells that your opponents may have 2 extra mana to pay. And for another loan copy here, the new card, Experimental Augury, wherein you look at the top 3 cards in the library. It's kind of an anticipate. Put one of them in your hand and the rest at the bottom of the library in random order. I mean in any order, and then proliferate. So very good source to also proliferate those poison counters, and at the same time have the counters, for example, from your Wandering Emperor, your this one from Secondary Warden, your shield counters could also be proliferated. And also this one for Rarbang Bastard, in which you can add more chance counters for card draws. Now for these cards specifically are just of the support and sorcery as your mass removal setup. So we have 2 populates, depopulates, 1 farewell, and 3 copies of Poison's Twilight. So what this means that we have only 3. We can go with 4, but the option here is that we're still sticking with the game plan of sweeping out your opponent's creatures, and so having more mana to pay for X to have it 5 or more to destroy other creatures is needed in this setup. So basically going with turn 7, or basically later than that, you can just sweep out the board, create these 1/1 Protection by tokens. You gain X life in the process also, and have those tokens take care of your opponents by kicking up enough toxic damage by poison counters. So along with that, why do you have the card draws and other board presence in the early game is in the form of winning announcements, and also Restoration of Brigandu to make sure that your library can be filtered out by a Plains card. And also you have this option to discard a card to return target permanent card with mana value 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, and have a solid creature and a blocker attacker in this setup with Architect of Restoration by creating more, of course, spirit 1/1 spirit colorless tokens. So along with also the card draws of Recurrent Masters, again mentioned, is not only being a source of card draws, but also a good 4/4 attacker if you're able to crew for 3 in most in certain situations. But the purpose here, of course, with the control is to have card draw engines early game. For example, you can have it in turn 2 placed, and then just wait out for your opponents to cast their good spells and just counter them. And if there are open extra mana, you're just going to pay 2 to draw a card, and also removing a counter from these artifacts. Now, last but not the least, why this control is very good in terms also of proliferating is with the Wandering Emperor. So Emperor would not only exile top creature and gain 2 life, but also creating some board presence with your samurai tokens. So comboing with the proliferate, your -1 ability to create these 2/2 tokens would not really be a drawback. And having also those counters can also good kinds of counters to proliferate with this kind of effects. So it's quite the setup of this blue eye control, but the main strategy is still being implemented with these kinds of card choices, and we're just having some new cards to include just to the purpose of having to have your opponents get a push counter and then proliferate from there in that setup. And last but not the least, in our land choices, the new cards probably here, the Sacrum Coast with 4 copies in the main deck, and along with it also are the usual stuff for blue-white in the standard format: a Darker Waste, Deserted Beach from Minas Hunt, the Slowlands, some Channel Lands with Iganjo, Seat of the Empire, Otawara, and a lone copy of Mirex, which can also be used in the game, very relevant because of creating these colorless Prussian Might artifact creature tokens if you are having those extra mana and kind of a mana sink for the late game. And along with it, just some of the Cardo effects, Roadside Reliquary, and a lone copy of Sparship Garters. This can be used not only to mana fix, but also for the late game cycling ability. So I guess that's about it for Mana Curve. You have 3 on average, surprisingly, because of this several 2 mana cost in your instance and 3 mana cost in enchantments, also with some of your Lorans and Ambitious Farmhand acting as the 2 drops and 3 drops in this build. For the color distribution, we have mostly white with 35, blue with 14, but the color producer would be very helpful and pretty much balanced with 18 for white and 17 for blue. And last but not the least are the tokens. We have Citizen from the Sanctuary Warden, Human from the Wedding Announcement, Might token from the Starlight, from the Ring Buster, also from the One Deck Emperor. Spirit tokens also from that Architect of Restoration, and lastly, Treasure token for this deck build. So I guess, guys, that's about it. That's kind of pretty much explains this deck tech I made for Blue White Control Poison Root for the standard format. If you have any recommendations or questions more, you can just comment below in the comment box as to we can check on what will be your suggestions or recommendations and what would be your possible changes in this build that you can get to upgrade this list as your go on preference. So thank you guys checking this video. See you on the next standard deck update, and don't forget to like and subscribe to Mark TV for more MTG stuff and news updates and related information. Thank you for watching this one, and see you on the next one.